G'day guys, welcome back to another video for Embargo. My name's Michael, I'm from Games with Teeth. And so we're going to touch on, we touched on the playboard last time, sorry. I'll show you that. I'll actually move my head over a little bit this time. And we're talking about how this is going to be something called a double layered playboard. I think I might have called it wrong in the last video. But Long Pack Games, these are the guys that we're looking to manufacture at this point in time. They can send you out a sample box, and in the sample box is a double layered playboard. So you've got the top board and you've got the bottom board, and the top board's glued onto the bottom board, and see how this bit's cut out. So what we're planning is the same thing, except at this stage it looks like we're going to go right to the edge, so you can just slide the card off so the card doesn't get stuck in the crevice, so to speak. So it's just easy to slide the cards in and out. This won't be a card, it will just have a picture there, because you don't need, that doesn't change that warehouse one there. So this video, we're going to touch on the actual mechanics of the game. Once I put the stuff down. Alright, it's quiet. So we've gone with something called an action checklist, where you have to, well, you get a certain amount of actions per turn, and those actions basically are your choice. There's going to be a lot of action choices, so we're going to probably have to make reference cards. So say we've got, the way freight is, what freight is, they're going to be little cubes in the middle of the table. So that's going to be what we call a hub, and players have their player board in front of them, and it's going to be, they're going to get, at this stage, they're going to get 5 actions per turn. Okay, so on your turn, you can do 5 things. One action would be to pick up a contract card, and it might say, deliver 5 freight to this contract. So you put it on a contract slot. That's all one action. Okay. To get 1 freight from the hub, to your warehouse is 1 action. 2 freight, 2 action. All right. So you got 2 freight here. Then moving freight from here to the warehouse is another action. Okay. So that's 4 actions, right? And then 5 actions. We're going with that just because it's going to give players a lot of choice in regards to what they do. I know a lot of people don't like action checklists. I think they add a lot of strategy and choices to the game itself. So there's also a penalty. Say you get a really good contract that you want to keep and you put it in your reserve slot. That's 1 action there. But actually to get that from your reserve slot back up, that's an action to put it down on an active contract. That's going to be an action. So sort of a penalty for sort of holding something as well. But it gives you so many options for actions. So we're going to have actions like move freight from the warehouse to a contract. And say you get a different contract, you can move freight from one contract to the other contract. And then what we realized we needed was an end game. It's like, okay, cool, we can fulfill contracts, but how do we end the bloody game? So we introduced victory points, and victory points are based on how much freight is required for the contract. So say you got a contract that says deliver 3 freight to this contract, and you go, okay, cool, you deliver 3 freight from that contract, you turn it in, you put it aside, and you get 3 victory points basically. You get 1 victory point for each freight. And what this creates is basically an end game for us. Once we got that all down, I did a test with my partner, and we realized it was a race just to get to 25 or 20 victory points at the time. So 20 victory points, it was just a race to see who could get the most contracts through. So we introduced something called sabotage cards. Okay, so sabotage cards are basically another deck in the middle of the table next to the contract deck. And they're basically going to be cards that benefit you, or not so much benefit you, but they impact other people and hinder their operations, basically. And you could also hold a sabotage card in your reserve slot, but only if the reserve slot's empty. Okay. But we introduced that, and it went a lot better. It was still just a race, so for now it looks like I'm going to have to increase the severity of the sabotage cards themselves. I've got about 20 designed at this stage. But one thing we also added was, say if I get a contract that says Bob's Fish and Chips, for example, and then someone else gets a contract, Bob's Fish and Chips, and say it needs 3 freight to complete it. Now that we've both got the same contract, there's a race to complete it. And so say my opponent puts 2 cubes on it and I manage to put 3 on it and I turn it in. What happens to their contract is that it gets discarded. So they lose out on that contract and then they have to return that freight to the hub. Not to your warehouse, to your hub, to the hub. So they have a penalty basically for not completing the contract. I think that creates a really cool dynamic. It's not going to be a game surrounded by that. There's going to be, I think I've labelled about 10 duplicate contracts. During a 2-player game, it didn't really come up. So we might be increasing the minimum player limit to 3. Because 2 players is pretty boring in regards to this game anyway. So if we go 3-player, I think it has more of a chance to rock up and create a contract race basically for those contracts. That's really it for this video. We'll be back very soon with the next. I have no idea what it's going to have. All right, cheers. Thanks for coming.